Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Ochi. My name is American Ben. As we know, Sweet Home explores despair as it relates to the terrible things that humans do to each other. Good people even do these things, and thus we might call their actions monstrous actions. And so too we might say that some humans are monsters, or have the capability to become monsters. In Sweet Home, the goal is to press on through despair. Bear it and not let it take from you your very humanity. It's the hardest thing to do sometimes, because the world tries very hard to rip your essence from you. And it takes supreme fortitude, insight, and, okay, yes, some nature too, to hold on to optimism through the demons that will come face you in life. And Sweet Home makes us question if perhaps sometimes we need to use the monster to get by when there's just no other choice. Control it, restrain it, but use it. Life requires balance. Well, there's probably some truth to that. And yet still I can't help but feel inspired, lifted even by people, or in this case fine fictional characters, who refuse to break anyway, refuse to let the monster out even at risk to one's own livelihood. In Sweet Home, the characters all fall along a spectrum between monstrous on one end and humane on the other. And after watching about the first 6 or 7 episodes, I felt like I had this spectrum pretty well laid out. On the monstrous extreme are the most violent characters, like the gang members, and on the humane one was one man alone, Jung Jae-hoon, the Korean language teacher and devout Christian who fancied himself a mighty fine swordsman and whose name I no doubt just butchered, no pun intended. If I had done this video after only watching those first 6 or 7 episodes, I probably would have said that he was the true hero of Sweet Home. He was selfless in many ways, he sacrificed his own well-being for the sake of others, and he was incredibly brave. And hey, I still think he's one of the show's heroes. However, if you made me pick just one, well, then according to the rules that Sweet Home wants us to play by, I would say that it's Park Yu-ri. And sorry if I mispronounced that name as well, please do feel free to correct me down below, I would very much appreciate it. When we first met Yuri, we learned that she was the caretaker of An Gil-sub, an elderly, terminally ill man who is not entirely easy to keep under control.
떠날 때가 된 것 같아.
아직입니다. 제가 오래 사시라고 속으로 열심히 욕하고 있습니다.
For Yuri, taking care of Gil-sub wasn't just a job. She truly cared about him. She worried about him. From her first scene onward, it was clear that she had a loving heart. But that's not to say that she couldn't be absolutely cold.
이 좁아 터지고 더럽게 오래된 이 방.
어르신보단 덜 오래되지 않았습니까?
Boom! Roasted. Seriously though, she was very charming and had a good sense of humor, and I think that came naturally for her because she enjoyed being around people. Especially Gil-sub, with whom she almost had a grandfather-granddaughter-like relationship.
위협된가?
방금 수명도 늦었습니다.
Now, just as a quick aside, I have to say I always enjoy seeing how East Asian films portray relationships between young and old people. I don't think that we in America demonstrate quite the same level of respect and care for elderly people in our society.
어디서 굴러 들어간 개벽다기들이. 더 한마디만 더해. 턱주거리 부어버린다.
There's a lot of great things about our society, but this specific element is something that's lacking. But perhaps I'm not being fair to Yuri here, because she was an especially caring person, who was not annoyed to have to do her work, or repulsed by having to clean up and watch over an old man. I'm sure inside, deep inside, Gil-sub was very grateful for her. Yuri wasn't just caring towards Gil-sub either. She seemed to try to take care of everyone.
정신이 듭니까?
필요 없어.
필요합니다. 출혈은 멎었지만 상처가 있습니다.
I mean, I'd be afraid to get a damn paper cut around her. She'd have me in a full-body cast before I could say anything to refuse her help. Yuri was more than just a compassionate person, though. She was also selfless.
지켜봅니다.
Despite all of the despair that Green Home tenants were facing, including Yuri herself, she still worried about others before herself. She still watched over Gil-sub. Her interactions with Pyeon Sang-wook were most interesting of all, because at first he wasn't accepting of her help.
지금 남 치료해줄 때예요? 아까 보니까 본인 숨이 헐떡헐떡 막 넘어가던데.
괜찮습니다.
Though he kind of had a point here. Yuri had asthma, and she wasn't doing well given the stress of her situation and her limited medicine supply. Her asthma was actually an important aspect of her character because it helped to demonstrate how selfless she was. She suffered from breathing problems throughout the show, and yet she never thought about her own maladies first. It was other people she put first. This to me was a really touching scene because Gil-sub brought her medicine. No one ever took care of her because she was too busy taking care of everyone else. And she almost seemed uncomfortable that someone was actually helping her. Gil-sub's compassion for her made her feel vulnerable. You know who you are out there, those of you who always are helping and complimenting other people. You can never take help or a compliment yourself. You know who you are. Beyond her selflessness, Yuri was also brave. But what made her bravery unique was that I don't think she derived courage from a lack of fear. Rather, it was her selflessness that forced her to be valiant.
왜 연습한 대로 안 해요? 좀 닥쳐 이 개새끼야. 하여튼 지 주인이랑 똑같아 주 그냥.
비키십시오.
다 죽을 일이 있어?
I don't think Yuri was dying to leave the room here to fight a monster as a weathered warrior would, but she felt a sense of duty to help the little girl. Again, even at risk to her own life. Yuri would make conscious moral decisions to do brave things.
가겠습니다. 수술 도구만 수십 종류입니다. 병원을 통째로 들고 올 거 아니라면 뭐가 필요한지 아는 사람이 가야 합니다.
What really surprised me about Yuri as I got to see more and more of her was that while I do think that her nature played a role in making her so compassionate and selfless, I also think that she cultivated these traits herself and had a thoughtfully developed moral philosophy that she practiced.
이런 세상에서 별걸 대체.
이런 세상이니까 살아남았으니까 더 사람답게 살아야 하는 겁니다.
Yuri wasn't just oblivious. She understood the trouble afoot in the world at that moment. She understood despair, and to her, kindness was a way to fight back against the monsters within that are entreated to come forth by the brutality of life. She did not heed these monsters within, as even some of the other Green Home tenants did. And not only that, but she was not foolish enough to distinguish between monsters and humans based on appearance. She was not repulsed by Sang-wook's badly scarred back, and I suppose as a caregiver she probably had to see some pretty disgusting things anyway. However, I do wonder, could it be that her job actually cultivated compassion in her? Perhaps if we expose ourselves to situations in which our empathy is required, then we encourage our humaneness to flourish and our demons to die. But Yuri went a step further in spurning monsterization, for even when ugly creatures reared their heads, she looked past them.
이런 이 호랑말 것 같은 놈.
고맙단 말을 저렇게 하십니다.
Here, obviously, Gil-sub didn't do anything that bad. But this cute little moment conveyed to me that people didn't even need to be nice to Yuri or justify themselves to her in order for her to see the good in them. She saw the good in Gil-sub, and she saw the good in Sang-wook too, even though he did some crappy things to her. And in this way, she rescued Sang-wook and others from monsterization. You'll notice that in Sweet Home, monsterization was actually, in a way, contagious. Not because it could be caught like a virus, but because the fear and anger that causes people to release the monster within them begets that same fear and anger in others, which then leads to more monsters emerging. But so too can humaneness spread the same way, and Yuri understood this principle.
죽고 싶습니까? 그쪽은 사는데 미련이 없는지 몰라도 티내지 말아주시겠습니까? 살아보려고 버티는 사람들 앞에서.
내가 왜?
그게 예의입니다.
Sang-wook let the monster in him burst forth due to the evils he experienced, which engendered madness within him. But before he could fully lose himself to monsterization, Yuri's humanity rubbed off on him. Her compassion made him compassionate, and thus he came to help her when she needed help. The scenes preceding that one, specifically those involving the psychopathic gang member attempting to assault Yuri, were perhaps the hardest to sit through in the entire series.
저기 가봐야 할걸? 환자가 힘들어하던데.
There's something just so profane and horrible about these types of moments. There's something so depraved about pure-hearted characters being preyed upon by evil ones. It's as if such malevolence sullies the world and upsets its balance. And though Yuri ultimately was not violated or killed, you can see what monsters do, what humans do. Sometimes there's no choice. When the balance has shifted and the world is given to monsterization at large, even clean hands can end up dirty. Though in a weird way, I suppose Frico Boy's blood went with Yuri's outfit, but I digress. Still, the point is that Yuri was forced to kill despite having no intention to. The state of the world around her left her absolutely no choice, save for die and let your friend die, or kill. And that is what happens when humanity as a whole leans towards the monstrous end of the human spectrum. There is no world left for the kind and selfless. Of course, in the end, Yuri didn't appear to make it out of Green Home alive. The most humane person did not survive Sweet Home, did not survive the monsters. And this forces us to ask ourselves, in a world of balance, in the world we live in today, must we let the monster in us out sometimes in order to survive? Is it perhaps not intended that humans should only be kind and selfless? Perhaps had Yuri been a touch less so, she would have survived. Still, she is the true hero of Sweet Home, and even though she perished, there's just something so inspiring about her refusal to break. When Sang-wook arrived on scene to help Yuri after she was attacked by Frico, her first words to him were,
사람을 주겠습니다.
Yuri was struggling to breathe and probably in pain given the physical struggle she had just endured. And yet, as usual, she had no concern for her own life. What bothered her was that she had killed someone. Even if that someone was a monster, it didn't matter, because she wasn't going to become one. Despite what had just happened to her, she did not turn bitter. She did not embrace fear and anger.
뭐 하십니까?
삽질.
그건 봐서 합니다. 어르신 무리하시면 안 됩니다.
She still worried about Gil-sub. She still made sure he was okay. Nothing changed in her. This is why, above all, she is the true hero of Sweet Home. She didn't even budge towards monsterization, even though she was witness to some of the darkest actions of man. Even as she lay dying in the car outside of Green Home, she again stated,
사람을 주겠습니다.
See, this was her special version of suffering. She wasn't exempt from despair. Everyone in Sweet Home despaired. And it was Yuri's very compassion and empathy that led her to despair. Because here she was, a humane person in a world overrun by monsters, and thus it was not a world fit for her. It forced her to do things that went against her heart.
그게 마지막 기억이 될까? 너무 무서워.
However, often it's these types of out-of-place people that the world needs most. And I think it would be fair to say that Sweet Home's world needs Yuri more than anyone in order to shift the balance back towards humaneness. Just before she succumbed to her wounds, Sang-wook tried to comfort her.
떠올리지 마.
아저씨들.
Even to her last breath, she was more worried about Sang-wook than herself. There was a toughness too, I think, and a pride to Yuri in this way. A type of pride that's born out of years and years of never considering one's own needs first. Eventually, it just becomes awkward to serve oneself. Though perhaps, to be more eloquent here, we might call this a state of ultimate humanity, where almost every other character found themselves victim to the temptations of monsterization at points, as all humans do, here and there fall to wickedry. Yuri never did. She never ever did. Anyways, that is my take on who the true hero of Sweet Home is. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a big thumbs up. Definitely comment down below. I want to hear your thoughts. Remember to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. For now, my name is American Ben, Generation Ochi. Peace.